Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be the best books that I read in 2020. So this is the beginning of like my end of the year wrap up type of videos. I think it's probably going to continue on into January. I wanted to do a video that was based off of my reading stats, and then I realized that the only thing tracking my reading stats from the beginning of the year is Goodreads, and that's not going to give it to me until January. So we're just gonna push that one off, I guess. So this one is going to be the top 10 best books that I read in the year of 2020. I don't think that I'm gonna put them in any particular order. I just don't feel the need to do that. I don't want to rank them. So these are just my favorite reads since January, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about them. So I do want to start it off with a preface that obviously these are the books that I liked the most that I read. I totally understand if you didn't enjoy them as well, or you know, whatever, everybody has different opinions. It's totally fine, it's totally okay. And I guess this disclaimer more applies to the next video, which is going to be my least favorite books of 2020, but I did just want to get that out of the way. So the first book on my list is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahiran. And this book follows Lou and Reed. Lou is a witch, Reed is a witch hunter, and it ends up being a love story. I mean, everybody probably has heard of Serpent and Dove by now. This is a YA fantasy. It takes place in kind of like old-timey France. I don't want to say medieval. I want to call it like 1800s France is the feeling that you get, but like an alternate 1800s France. So there's like a lot of French. I don't know whether or not the French is accurate. I don't speak any French, but it is definitely the vibe that she was going for. I loved Serpent and Dove so much. The general idea is, like I said, Lou is a witch, Reed is a witch hunter. Circumstances happen and they end up being forced to marry one another, but he doesn't know that he's married a witch, and she is trying very hard to keep that a secret from him. Usually this communication trope thing really annoys me. I think she did it very well in this because obviously she had reasons to lie. She was trying to protect her life. But yeah, I loved this book so much. It absolutely blew me away. I read it almost in one sitting. I'm pretty sure I read like everything but the last 100 pages in one sitting, and then I woke up and I blew through those as fast as I could the next morning. So I really enjoyed it. All of these books that are on my list, I gave 5 stars. Like I said, they're in no particular order, but Serpent and Dove was so good, and I had really looked forward to reading the sequel this year because I think it came out, I want to say it came out in September, August. I have it. It's sitting on my bookshelf. I haven't read it yet. I heard it leaves off on a cliffhanger, and that makes me very nervous. I hate reading series when they're still in the process of being written and being stuck on a cliffhanger, because I think, and no offense to the authors, but sometimes I think it's just rude. I understand you want your fans coming back, but like, we need some closure, guys. We need some closure in order for me to read it right away. And if I hear that there's gonna be a cliffhanger, it just makes me want to wait until the last book comes out so that I know that I'm gonna be able to find out what happens next immediately. Think of me as Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. I need endings. They're very important to me. So while Serpent and Dove was one of my favorite reads of the year, I don't think that we'll be reading Blood and Honey before this year is out. I am obviously going to be getting to it next year, sometime in 2021, probably closer to August. I don't know if I'll be able to wait that long. I've been struggling to not pick it up as it is already, so we shall see. The next book on my list is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This is an author-writing duo. They write a lot of rom-com romances. The Unhoneymooners is actually the second book of theirs that I picked up. The first one was Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, I think it's called. But I loved The Unhoneymooners so much. So this book follows Olive and Ethan. They are the maid of honor and the best man, respectively, at their sibling's wedding. Her twin is marrying his brother, and everybody at this wedding gets food poisoning, except for these two. Olive has I think she has allergies, or she doesn't like something that's on the buffet. Ethan has a severe aversion to eating at a buffet. He thinks that they're unclean, and after the story, honestly, it's kind of not proving him wrong. So they end up being the only two out of the entire wedding to not get sick, and the issue is the bride has won a non-refundable honeymoon getaway. I want to say to Hawaii. It might not be, but it's some kind of island paradise. She doesn't want this trip to go to waste, so she absolutely insists that Olive and Ethan go on their vacation for them. Olive kind of like takes over her sister's identity because it's all booked under her name, and like so they're identical twins, and so I guess that's how they pull it off. So it's kind of like enemies to lovers because they really don't like each other, but for reasons. It was like a misunderstanding when they first met kind of a situation. But enemies to lovers meets fake dating with all of the hilarity that ensues with all of that. And it was incredible. I laughed so hard through the entire book. I loved it so much. And it really hit on a couple more serious topics than I was anticipating. Nothing like hard-hitting or anything, but it definitely got a little bit deeper into not just their relationship with each other, but like their siblings' relationship and things that were happening there, and I really liked that as well. It gave it a little bit more depth. Not that I, need depth in my romance storylines, I just enjoy it for what it is, but I think that it really added something, and I loved this book so much. The next book on my list is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. This is another one that I read pretty much in one sitting because I loved it so much. Apparently Loki didn't like it because he's running away. I adore any Beauty and the Beast retelling. Beauty and the Beast is one of my all-time favorite Disney movies. I will watch it over and over and over again, and this retelling was so much better than any of the other ones. I mean, barring ACOTAR. I don't really see ACOTAR as a Beauty and the Beast retelling, in all honesty. That's a whole other tangent. Anyway, this was a fantastic Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it follows Harper, who is your normal, average, living in the city girl who is just trying to make her way in the world with her family. They are super, super broke. They're really struggling. She has cerebral palsy, but it's not like a part of her character that defines her. It's just, it's just there. It's just a part of her, and she does everything, and it's not something that is a main part of the storyline, in all honesty. I really liked that kind of representation. Obviously, I can't speak to that kind of disability rep, but I have heard that it does a very good job with it, and I like that a lot. Harper is out in the city one night doing things, and she sees a girl getting attacked by a mysterious man in an alley. So she tries to go and save this poor girl and ends up getting attacked herself and transported into this other world. This is where she meets Prince Ren, who is the Prince of Emberfall and has been cursed by the evil witch type character to turn into a horrific monster every single season and murder everyone and everything in its path, unless he can get somebody to fall in love with him. You see the Beauty and the Beast tie-in. It was so good, guys. I loved this book so much. I cannot rave about it enough. I really, really enjoyed every single second of it from beginning to end. The writing was so interesting, it kept me going, it was really fast-paced. You know the stakes are high because Ren can't control himself when he transforms and he just murders everything. I'm not going to say more than that, it might spoil some parts of the story. I don't know, I'm going to err on the side of caution here. If you saw one of my previous hauls, you would know that I have the second book. I have not gotten around to reading the second book, but I really do need to get to it soon. I'm hoping to within the next few weeks because A Vow So Bold and Deadly, I think, is the third book, and that comes out, I want to say, in February, so I really need to get it together. I have wanted to read A Heart So Fierce and Broken since it came out in January of this year, so I'm finally going to be finishing that up so that I can move on to the third book in the series because it is so good, guys. I cannot talk about it enough. I know that we're all kind of sick of fairy tale retellings at this point, but I promise you, give this one a shot. The next book on my list is Aurora Rising by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. So this I picked up the day after I picked up Serpent and Dove. It was a really good reading weekend for me. This was like a Friday-Saturday deal, and I made a couple of pretty good choices in a row, if I do say so myself. So, Aurora Rising is YA sci-fi fantasy. Obviously, it's co-written by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. You follow Tyler, who is about to realize all of his dreams at the Aurora Academy by following in his father's footsteps, but the day before he's supposed to, I think, graduate and, choose his team, he can't sleep. So he takes his ship out, and he kind of just goes for a little bit of a cruise to calm himself down, and he ends up getting sucked into some kind of space storm and rescuing a girl that's kind of in this wrecked ship that he finds in the middle of this storm. And he saves her, and they find out that everybody else on that ship has been dead for 300 years, and she has been saved because she's in cryo sleep and everybody else has failed. So Tyler saves her life, and things ensue. He is late for his ceremony, and he ends up getting stuck with not the worst of the worst, but the misfits that don't really belong with anybody else. I love every single one of them. I can see how they would get on most people's nerves, but they were entertaining to read. I loved all of them. And this is very much a found family kind of trope. So you follow Tyler and Aurora, who is the girl on the ship that he rescued, and then there's Scarlet, who is Tyler's, I think, twin sister. She's a badass and I love her. You also follow the rest of the team in their various POVs. I don't want to say too much more because it could kind of spoil it, and it does kind of end off on a little bit of a cliffhanger, but not one that bothered me too much. Not like the sequel did. The sequel left off on a cliffhanger that had me raging, and I am not happy about that, so I'm gonna need the next book to come out very soon. But anyway, this was so good. I blew through this. This definitely was a one-sitting book. I know for a fact that I finished this in one day. It's a quick read. It's YA sci-fi. I'm gonna say that the plot line has some very strong tie-ins, in my opinion, to the first Mass Effect game. I noticed a couple of similarities to that. The only knock that I would say that I have against it is that it kind of read on the younger side of YA. This isn't something that bothered me, though. I kind of thought of it as a campy, fun, space opera type thing. It's very different from Illuminae Files, but in the same way it's kind of similar to the Illuminae Files. It's hard to describe, you just have to read it for yourself, and I promise you, you'll love it. The next book on my list, I'm not going to take it off of my shelf because it is in its place of honor right here, but I'm going to scooch over so you can see its cover in all of its glory, is A House of Earth and Blood, or Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. I've talked about it before. I love Sarah J. Maas. I understand that you're not going to be learning any life lessons from her writing, and I am totally okay with that. I can love them and accept that they're trash. Alright, guys? It's fine. Whatever. House of Earth and Blood was fantastic. Bryce and Hunt are, hands down, two of my favorite characters in the entire world. This book absolutely destroyed me in the beginning, but I loved it so much at the end, and I should probably tell you what it's about. So if you haven't heard of House of Earth and Blood, you follow Bryce, who is, I think she's half fae. She's living the good life. She is partying all the time, she's sleeping around. You do you, she's having a good time, whatever. And this is not a spoiler because it's literally in the synopsis, but if you don't like spoilers at all, I'll put my hand up and I'll put it down when I'm done talking about it. But in the very first 60 pages or so of the book, she comes home to all of her best friends. Her absolute best friend in the entire world, Danica, and her entire wolf pack, because they are werewolves, are horribly murdered in their apartment. And that's it, I guess. And so Bryce has to deal with that, and so she kind of doesn't deal with it. They think that they've figured out who the person or thing was that did it, so she's kind of trying to figure out how to live with that, and then a couple of years later, it all comes back up again for various reasons, and she is tasked with finding out who the real culprit was of that horrific thing that happened in the beginning of the book. And she is also tasked with investigating this with Hunt Athalar, who is a fallen angel, I guess you could say. Romance ensues, murder mystery, hijinks ensue. It was just great. The world that she created is your top-notch urban fantasy, all of your magical beings in the same place, but in a world where technology still exists and people have cell phones. It was just great. I am a sucker for urban fantasy. I always have been, I always will be. And God, this book, it wrenched at my heartstrings so many times. I sobbed. There was a scene towards the end. I sobbed. I was sitting there on the couch reading this book and crying like a baby. But it was so good, and I really need to reread it because I loved it so much, and sometime next year the sequel will be coming out, and I cannot wait. The next book on my list is Ash Princess by Laura Sebastian. I did a review for this book a few months ago because I was so obsessed with it, and then for some reason I haven't moved on to the sequel yet, but it's fine. We'll get there soon, I hope. Ash Princess follows Princess Theodosia. Her country was invaded and her entire family was murdered, but the invaders decided to keep her alive and keep her as a prisoner so that if any rebel faction tried to rise up and overthrow the kingdom, she was the one who would be tortured for it. This effectively stops any rebellion that they try to make, because they know what will happen to their princess if they try and do anything like this. She is publicly punished. I have my entire review video for it dedicated to this book, so I'm not going to go too far in depth as to what I thought about it. I loved it so much, and I will link my review up above for anybody who wants to go and watch and see what my full spoilery and non-spoilery thoughts were about this book, but I'm not going to talk too much more about it just because this video is long enough already. I guess I should say there is a plot outside of that. She does decide that one day enough is enough, and she should stop letting her people be scared that she's going to be punished and just stand up for herself, and she does that, and it's great, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. The next book on my list is City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I loved this book mostly because it was so different than anything else that I've ever read. So this follows Nari, and Nari is a con woman, a thief, kind of, living on the streets of Cairo. Maybe she has a place to live. I don't know if she's on the streets, but she's working the streets of Cairo. And she kind of passes herself off as a mystical woman who can, like, get rid of spirits and commune with them and all of these other things. She has knowledge of herbs and stuff like that. And one day she is hired to perform an exorcism, and in so doing, she chants some words that she doesn't know what they mean, and she accidentally summons Dara, who is a Jinn warrior. This brings her to the attention of the evil Jinn, and then they are on the run trying to get her to Daevabad, or the City of Brass, which is in the land of the Jinn. You also follow the viewpoint of Ali, who is a prince in Daevabad, and it's just so good. That was such a terrible summary, but I promise you, it's so good. The mythology, the Egyptian mythology, the world building, all of it was so amazing. I have not had the chance yet to move on to the sequel, which is kind of the theme for this video, but I loved this book so much. And the audiobook is really good too, for the record, because I think I listened half of this on an audiobook. It was great. Just go read it. I promise. Just do it. I had to choose between two of Kevin Hearn's new releases this year as to which one I wanted to use for this, but I think that Ink and Sigil wins by far. Ink and Sigil I've mentioned in multiple videos at this point, but if you haven't seen any of those, this is a spin-off of the Iron Druid Chronicles. It follows Al McVarish, who is a sigil master. He uses ink and, like, symbol magic and is in charge of overseeing contracts in the magical world and establishing contracts in the magical world and things like that. Al has an issue, though, because all of his apprentices just keep dying, and the last one has died under some very suspicious circumstances. Al is totally sick of this at this point, and he decides to investigate what his apprentice was up to before he died. This really kind of just drags him into pretty dangerous situations, and it's hilarious, and I loved it, and it's just so good, guys. Kevin Hearn's writing is so good. If you haven't tried it yet, definitely give him a shot. We're almost to the end, and the second to last book, this should come as no surprise to anybody, but Words of Radiance has been my favorite Sanderson book of the entire year. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I think I'm going to do a full-on review for this by itself and give it the attention that it deserves, but you all know that I loved Way of Kings, and if you've been following my channel for a while, oh my god, ring light, we'll hold it like that. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I've been doing a Cosmere read-along through probably since like March or April or so, I think is when I read The Final Empire and started it all. So I finally made it to the Stormlight Archive in October, and Words of Radiance was read in November, and God, it's so good. I don't know how to talk about it without spoiling it. So the first book, Way of Kings, follows four main characters, and that's Kaladin, Shallan, Dalinar, and Adolin, and they are all in various stages of their life, in various places around the world, and Way of Kings kind of just follows their character arcs as they deal with their country of Alethkar being in a war with the Parshendi. This all takes place on a place called the Shattered Plains, and things ensue from there. I have an entire review dedicated to the Way of Kings, so again, if you're interested, I will link that up above as well. I think it goes on this side. Maybe it goes on this side. I think it goes on this side. We're gonna say this side. So I will link that up above as well, but Words of Radiance was so good. I just finished Warbreaker, and I will be moving on to Oathbringer as soon as I can. I'm so excited. The last book on my list I don't have a copy of, but I loaned it out to somebody, so it's fine. I'll put a picture over here or something. Well Met by Jen DeLuca was the cutest romance that I might have read all year. It was so sweet. It follows Emily? I think her name is Emily? I don't remember what the lead guy's name is, but that's fine. So you follow her as she moves in with her sister. Her sister has been in a terrible car accident. She's there to help her out and deal with her niece. And her niece has gotten her involved in the local town's Ren Fair. This Ren Fair is put on by the community. It's a big deal, and somehow she gets embroiled in it, even though it's absolutely not her scene. She ends up kind of falling in love with the guy who is in charge of it, and it's so funny from beginning to end. It's so good. It's mostly enemies to lovers with a little bit of fake dating thrown in there. It's so good. The sequel just came out and I can't wait to get my hands on it, but yeah, I definitely recommend Well Met, guys. The whole Ren Fair thing was just the cutest setting for a romance novel in the entire world. I think I stayed up until 3 in the morning reading this one. I have no regrets. Well, that's it for my top 10 books of 2020. I hope you guys liked it. Let me know if you have read any of these, whether or not you agree or disagree in the comments down below. I'm looking forward to talking about them with you, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!